Right now, we're about to dive into one of my favorite exercises. And the reason for that is because it has caused great results for both me and my clients. In fact, it was almost like there was this light bulb that went on when we found out about something that's called the false vocal folds. So the true vocal folds are the ones that you have in your larynx, and those are the ones that are responsible for your voice, for your sound. And that's their function. Then you have the false vocal folds, which are actually right above the true vocal folds. And their function is not to speak. In fact, their function is to protect. So as you see here, under your larynx, your voice box is the trachea. And that one, that's the air pipe. And that one transports the air to the lungs, or provides a place where the air can be led to the lungs. So whatever happens when you're swallowing is your vocal folds are closing, but also your false vocal folds are closing because they're providing extra protection so no food can come into your lungs whenever you are eating and swallowing. And then also you have the epiglottis. So as soon as you swallow, you may experience that in your throat. Your larynx actually moves up, and so the epiglottis also protects your air pipe from food coming in. So another function of the false vocal folds is to support you when you need a lot of strength. So maybe you recognize this whenever you carry something that's extremely heavy, you tend to make the sound that. So let's do it a couple times. And what you are feeling and hearing right now is your false vocal folds are closing. They're contracting, is what you call it in a more fancy way. And when you sing, you do not want to use your false vocal folds unless you're trying to go for a specific sound. In metal, they use it for grunting, for example, but that has to be done under supervision of a vocal coach until you actually have mastered that, because it can really affect your voice in a very negative way. So we want to avoid using the false vocal folds as much as possible. And the reason for that is whenever they are closing, they put the true vocal folds in a really cricket position. And naturally, your vocal folds actually have this really beautiful process of vibrating and opening, closing. There's a lot of coordination that's going on in there. And as soon as the false vocal folds are putting the vocal folds in a different position, and there's less space there, what you actually get is that vibration pattern is interrupted. And what can happen is that some air can seep through. Your voice may sound a little more raspy, or maybe it sounds more hoarse. It for sure will feel like you have to make a lot more effort, and it can feel squeezed as well. So the way I like to see it is whenever you are, usually this happens when you are trying to sing something that you find very challenging, for example, belting, or maybe it's high notes. And because it's challenging, as humans, we tend to help ourselves, and we tend to put more pressure and tense more muscles. And the false vocal folds then think about their function. They want to help when you need strength. They think, oh, let me help. They need strength. Let me actually contract. So what you want to do is, in that case, actually lean in and just put tension on the muscles that are supposed to be used. So basically what we're going to do whenever you feel that you are having it, the way you actually can recognize using your false vocal folds is when it feels strained, when your voice sounds rough or raspy, but it didn't before. So it's like immediately it sounds raspy, But another thing that a lot of you can probably relate to is when you feel like there's a little itch in your throat, or maybe you are wanting to cough or immediately cough right after a really high belt note. Those are all signs that your false vocal folds were actually contracting. So what we want to do is retract. So we want them to be as wide as possible. So one way to really intentionally do it, because it's not necessarily about from now on, now that you know, you can't ever do it again. No, you want to know, especially when it's a habit, when it happens, what can you do in that moment to actually shift it? So you don't have to keep going and struggling through it and just think like, well, there's nothing I can do at this point. You can do something at this point. So what we're going to do is retract the false vocal folds. First, I want you to get familiar with what it feels like to have your false vocal folds actually activated. So I want you to use your hands and go and sit on your hands. And then you're going to try to push yourself up. And you make sound with it. And now observe what is happening in your throat, what is happening with your tongue, how does it feel, and how does it sound? Okay, I'm going to take a moment and we're going to observe. And how does it feel afterwards? Do you maybe want to clear your throat? I know I want to. So what we're going to do is exactly the opposite. There are multiple ways. One of the ways is to actually yawn. So have more of a, not actually allow it to go completely into a yawn, but make the yawn movement. What happens is your larynx is lowering and it's also widening your false vocal folds. So that will be, oh, oh, oh. So let's say you do it on a ah, 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 ah. So that will be a way to actually widen your false vocal folds. However, not every one of you would actually like that sound for the song that you're singing. So there's another way where you actually have a little more oomph, and that is also referred to as head-neck anchoring, but you don't have to go that far. But you may recognize it if you know what head-neck anchoring is. So basically, you want to imagine that you have a big, juicy apple in your hand. And in this case, you actually walked 5 miles in the heat and you forgot your water bottle. So you just stepped into the house and you saw this big, fat, juicy apple and you're like, I'm going to get me some hydration. So you have it in your hand and you're so thirsty. So you're about to take a big, fat bite. Here we go. All right, and now you're going to focus on what does it feel like in my throat, what is happening, and what does my tongue do? The same things that you were observing when you did the false vocal folds. Here we go. All right, you probably experienced that the back of your throat was very, very wide. And even if you think about what it feels like now, and you go and take that bite, you'll probably feel this. So it's widening in every area. Now, if you do it very extreme, you'll have the head neck anchoring. This, you don't have to do it very extreme, but you can. For belting, the head neck anchoring is really, really helpful. So now we're going to make a sound. Okay, we're going to take a bite. One more time. So that already sounds really different than and both are widening your false vocal folds. So now you want to be able to do it with your mouth closed. Let's try it. Okay. So getting back to the idea of whenever you're in a song and you're performing or you're in a service, a church service, and you feel the little itch or you feel it strained, you want to immediately be able to shift it. So this next exercise is exactly for that. And what we're going to do is we're going to start really extreme with our false vocal folds closed or constricted. And then we're slowly going to the open throat, the biting the apple, and we have them retracted. Okay, so it sounds like this. We're going to do it on the A. Ah. Did you hear that difference? Let's do it again. 3, 2, 1. Ah. Now, when you practice this, you don't have to do the very extreme false vocal fold constriction. What you also just can do is just start a little bit tense. So just a little bit constrict the false vocal folds and then go to open because you don't want to irritate your vocal folds in your throat as much. So here we go. We're just going to do kind of like a medium constriction. So that will be like that. All right. So this was the exercise, and I hope you enjoy it.